Welcome to Real Therapy Gone Wrong, where film real meets real life. We are Lindsay Murray and Brandy Sellers, two sex therapists who point out the difference between Hollywood therapy and real life therapy. This show does not constitute a therapeutic relationship. In today's episode, we are covering the movie One Flew Over the Cuckoo's Nest, which can be viewed on Amazon Prime or Apple TV. Brandy is going to recap the movie, and we will chime in as we go to comment on the therapy and other mental health issues. So, Brandy, take it away.
Okay. So before we start, I want to give a few content notifications. This is what I'm saying instead of trigger warning. In this movie and also in our discussion today, there will be talk about suicide, sexual assault. There are many outdated words for mental illness and Native Americans in this movie. And so I just want to say at the front that we know they're outdated words, but we will be using the words that they use in the movie. Also, some sources that I used to collect information about the movie are Wikipedia, Britannica.com, and IMDb. So before we talk about the content of the movie, because this is such a well-known movie, I wanted to give a little information about the movie for people who may not have seen it or may not have seen it for a long time. So it came out in 1975. The budget for the movie was $3 to $4 million, but the box office gross has been over 163 million.
Mm-hmm.
And I read that Jack Nicholson, because the budget was so low, he agreed to take a percentage of profits instead of having a low salary. So I'm sure that I don't know what the percentage was, but probably worked out really well for him.
Yeah.
The movie was filmed in Salem, Oregon, and it was actually filmed at the Oregon State Mental Hospital. And many of the extras in the movie are patients at the hospital.
Oh, wow.
And the cast who were playing mental patients stayed at the hospital during the filming so that they could be like in the roles. One Flew Over the Cuckoo's Nest is number 33 on the American Film Institute's 100 Years, 100 Movies list. And it was actually selected to be preserved in the National Film Registry. So it not only was a big deal movie in 1975, but today people still recognize it as an amazing film.
Mm-hmm.
It was adapted from a book written by Ken Casey, which was published in 1962. So the movie is set in the 60s, even though it comes out in 1975. One interesting fact about the movie is that it's one of only 3 films to have ever won all 5 of the major Oscar categories. So it won Best Picture, Best Actor, Jack Nicholson, Best Actress, Louise Fletcher, who plays our beloved Nurse Ratched, Best Director, Milos Forman, and Best Screenplay. And the screenplay was adapted by Lawrence Hobben and Bo Goldman. The other 2 movies who have won all 5 of those Oscars is It Happened One Night, which came out in 1934, and The Silence of the Lambs, which came out in 1991.
Oh, okay. So it's been a little while since another movie has, which that's kind of a huge deal to win all of those. So
Yeah,
that makes sense.
yeah, I actually haven't seen It Happen One Night, so I got to put that on my list. So the setting of the movie in 1963, 38-year-old Randle McMurphy, who is played by Jack Nicholson, is on an Oregon work farm for the statutory rape of a 15-year-old girl. And he also has had a record of other assaults. So he pretends to be insane to get himself transferred to a mental institution and avoid hard labor. The ward is dominated by the head nurse, Ratched, who is played by Louise Fletcher, who is a cold, passive aggressive tyrant and
Beloved.
a beloved. We love her.
Yeah.
Other patients in the ward include a young, anxious, stuttering Billy Bibbit, who's played by Brad Dourif, Charlie Cheswick, who's played by Sidney Lassick, who is prone to temper tantrums, the delusional, childlike Martini, who's played by a young Danny DeVito.
Which,
The
by
art
the way, I didn't know that was Danny DeVito. My
Really?
husband said, yeah, I think, because I was telling him what movie we were watching, and he's like, oh, yeah, that has Danny DeVito, right? And I've seen the movie before, and I flat out was like, no, he's not in the movie. And even as I'm watching it, I'm like, he hasn't showed up yet. And then Andrew walked in, he's like, that's Danny DeVito. And I was like, oh, I'm used to seeing Danny DeVito in like current times, not the 70s. So
Well, and he does. something with his face in this whole while he's playing this role, where
Yeah.
it's like he's smiling slash wincing, that it doesn't even really look like him. Like
And
his
he doesn't talk very much either.
Yeah,
So the one time that I remember him talking, I was like, "Oh my god, now I can tell that it's him." But you're right, something with the way he is expressing his face doesn't even look like him. It's very, interesting.
yeah. Also there, Dale Harding is another character played by William Redfield. Belligerent and profane Max Tabor is played by Christopher Lloyd, another amazing actor.
Love it.
And there is a deaf mute Native American character, Chief, who is played by Will Sampson, and then several other characters with various chronic mental health conditions. One fact I saw about Chief is Will Sampson, the character or the person who played Chief, was a park ranger in Oregon near where the movie was filmed. And
Mm.
he was basically the only Native American person they could find who had the stature to play this character. And so that's how he got recruited for this role.
Oh, wow.
So the movie opens to this really serene scene of like the Oregon mountains and a lake. And then you flash to the mental hospital where Randle McMurphy is arriving. And the orderlies at the hospital, because it's set in the 60s, so they're wearing all white and they have black bow ties. And the orderlies are all played by black men, which I think is very interesting. And
Mhm.
the two main ones are Washington, who's played by Nathan George, and Warren, who's played by Mwako Kumbuka. So when Randall gets to the ward, he meets Chief and he does this interpretation of a powwow, which today, like, obviously it was really racist. But in the movie, in the time of the movie, I guess it was appropriate. But he's told that Chief doesn't talk and that he can't hear either. And then Randall goes to see Dr. Spivey, who's played by Dean Brooks, who is the psychiatrist at the facility, both in the movie and in real life. So in real life,
Mm.
he was the psychiatrist at the Oregon Mental Hospital. Side note that I found that was interesting during the filming of the movie, he diagnosed the actor William Redfield with leukemia, and that actor actually died shortly after the movie was over.
Wow. I didn't know that.
Because this movie is so well known, there's so
Yeah.
much trivia out there
Oh
about the
my
movie.
gosh,
So it
yeah.
was fun to read all that. So when Randall's in with Dr. Spivey accuses him of faking mental illness, and Randall says he's a goddamn marvel of modern science. Like he's just got so much bravado
Mhm.
and smartassery. So back on the ward, Randall McMurphy begins interfering with the routines that are established by Nurse Ratched, and you do not interfere with the routines established by Nurse Ratched.
Yeah, because talk about a very controlling, like, calculated character. That's definitely Nurse Ratched. I mean, they even show, like, it's medication time and, like, their whole routine of getting the meds ready and the time that they meet, and I mean, it's very, rigid. I would describe her
Yes.
as rigid.
Yes, and one of the things I saw too was talking about how, like, her hair and her nurse's hat, how that was done was very intentional to sort of look like devil horns. So, like,
Yeah.
there are a lot of things about the movie that are subtle but were intentionally done. So they're at a group therapy session, and McMurphy suggests a change in the schedule because he knows the World Series is on and he wants to watch it. And Nurse Ratched said that a change in routine is inadvisable, but she suggests that they could take a vote. So they go to take a vote, and nobody except for Randall and two other patients will raise their hands. So that's where you sort of start to see that maybe people don't go against Nurse Ratched.
Mhm.
Like, maybe she has some weird control of this group.
Well, and also the group therapy sessions are super weird and I would say inappropriate. Like, it's a little
Yeah.
weird because she's a nurse, but she's like providing quote unquote therapy. And I think there's like one point in the movie where she's like, this is therapy. Like, here's where we talk. But she's not a therapist. She's not a mental health professional. She's a nurse. And the way she's running the group is very like, she's putting people on the spot. She's like, "So and so said last week that their wife cheated on them," or something like that, and, like, what does everyone think about that? And I'm thinking, if I was in a group, I don't know if I'd want people's opinions on, like, my marriage, or you know what I mean? She's very, like, kinda pushy in that way.
Yeah, she uses the group for public shaming and
Yes.
manipulation. Yeah,
100%. And it
clearly
pits them
has no
it
therapy
and it
skills.
pits them against each other. They end up getting mad at each other, and she just lets it happen. There's one time where they're all, like, yelling and screaming at each other, and she's just sitting there, which that's
Mhm.
not what you would do if there was, like, an outbreak in the group, you would stop it. So I thought the
Yeah.
group therapy was I was like, "Oh, here we go."
Mhm.
Mhm.
So, after that, um, Harding and Tabor, 2 of the inmates or patients, get into a fight over a game of Monopoly, and they're, like, in the bathroom, shower room, or tub room place, and McMurphy sprays them with a hose and then announces that he is gonna throw a water fountain through the window to escape to watch the World Series. So this is the first time that we see him like, maybe I want to get the fuck out of here. Maybe this was not a good idea. So there's this
Mhm.
giant ass marble water fountain and he tries to lift it up and not surprisingly cannot lift it up.
'Cause it has to weigh a ton. It
Oh
looks
yeah.
like a solid block of yeah, he clearly cannot just pick it up by himself.
Plus it's like connected to the ground and all this
Yes.
other plumbing and yeah. It was a pipe dream. So then we see another group therapy session, and Nurse Ratched is up to her nonsense of shaming someone. So she's shaming Billy Bibbit, the stuttering character, and asking him why he didn't disclose to his mother that he had fallen in love. So just like very inappropriate. Like, why would he disclose that to his mother? Just
And why
really,
does it matter at
why are we in
all?
group
Yeah.
therapy talking about it? Yeah.
Yeah.
So, Cheswick and McMurphy ask for a vote on watching the game on the World Series. So here we see McMurphy trying this again, like really want to watch the World Series. And this time, all the patients in the group vote in favor. But then Nurse Ratched points out that those in the therapy group are only half of the inmates on the ward. And so the change is denied. So Randall starts announcing a fake baseball game as the patients cheer and Ratched is like watching over them. And so she's really noticing that Randall is getting the other patients on his side.
Yeah,
And
and the issue with, like, watching the World Series, again, I was thinking, "What's the big deal?" Like, they've got nothing else to do. You might as well just turn the TV's on to
right,
some random channel, so I'm like, "You could just turn the channel to the game."
right.
But it just shows she does not wanna give in to what they want. She wants to keep them down, essentially.
Yes. She wants to keep them controlled. They have no agency,
No.
which is not very good mental health support. It's like number one,
No.
we want people to have agency.
Mhm.
Nurse Ratched does not give a shit about agency. So Randall starts announcing this fake baseball game. Ratchet's watching over them, and then Randall goes to see Dr. Spivey after this, and then he says this really insightful thing about Nurse Ratched. He says, "She's something of a cunt, ain't she, Doc?" And then he said, "She likes a rigged game." So this is
Mm.
the moment where you really see like what she's up to, and that he knows what she's up to.
Yeah.
So then they're outside in the yard later, and McMurphy climbs on Chief's shoulders and easily gets over the security fence and hides in a bus that is waiting to take the inmates on a field trip. So, w- so at first I thought he's going on the field trip too, but then the inmates are all on the bus and no guards are on the bus, and he hops into the driver's seat and drives away. And then they go on this amazing adventure. He takes them to the pier. They basically steal a boat
And he stops
and
to he stops to pick up a woman on the
stops to
way
pick up
too.
candy on the way, his girlfriend or friend. And then they go out on this boat. And one thing I read about this is this movie was filmed in sequential order, except for this scene was the last scene that they filmed.
Oh.
And that Jack Nicholson was the only person in the cast who was not terribly seasick, and it took them a whole week to shoot this scene.
Oh my gosh.
So, but I think, like, knowing that and watching the movie, they did all look a little sick, but it kind of made you think they're just out of where they're supposed to be. They've
Yeah.
never been fishing. He's trying to teach them how to fish and drive a boat and do all of these things. So then it shows them returning happily to the dock with huge fish that they've caught and several police officers and Dr. Spivey waiting for them.
There's also a hilarious zoom out because like the person he assigned to like drive the boat like stops controlling the boat and so then the boat's like out of control and then it zooms out and you can just see them like the boat's just going in a circle and there's people on the like on this bridge just watching. They're like, oh yeah, we can see this boat just going in circles. So it's kind of hilarious to like all the chaos that's happening and like the outside view of what the hell are they doing on this boat.
Totally. So after this scene, they're back at the hospital. Dr. Spivey and other doctors agree that Randle McMurphy is not mentally disturbed and should be returned to prison. But Nurse Ratched is at this meeting and she persuades them that she can help him if he remains on the ward.
Mhm.
So here's where you see, like, oh, she actually has a lot of power in this situation.
Yeah, they turn to her and listen to her and kind of honestly what she says goes. You see it a couple times in the movie. She gives demands, people do it. And
Yes,
she says, why would we want to or if we let him go, we're giving our problem to someone else and we don't like to do that. That's a really weird way of putting that because if he doesn't qualify to be at this institution, he doesn't need to just go back to prison. But she's doing it because she wants to control him.
absolutely. And I want to make it clear that this is not how it works today. So
Yeah.
when people are involuntarily committed in a mental hospital, patients have an opportunity. There's a thing called mental health court that, depending on where you are, is the frequency in Collin County. I think it meets twice a month in Collin County, Texas. It might meet weekly.
Okay.
But at the mental health court, the patient has an opportunity to show up and speak for themselves. And there's always a court appointed attorney or their own attorney there.
Yeah.
And then there's an attorney that represents basically the state. And so the patients have an opportunity to speak for themselves and say, here's why I don't think I belong here, if they want to. So it's not just randomly left to happenstance and one or two people who might be bad actors. There is actually a pretty fair process for this. And then there's a judge who presides over the mental health court who ultimately decides whether the person stays in or can get released.
Which is really great that we do that today because that's the agency that they need. Like if you
Yeah,
left it at if Nurse Ratched is like the final say, that's a lot of power for one person to have to be like, I call the shots and I'll choose who's here. And it's like, ooh, that's not good.
well, and also if you look at the fact that if it's a state institution, then the institution is getting money from the state.
Mm-hmm.
If it's a private institution, they're getting money from the patients.
Mm-hmm.
And if money is involved, then there could also be corruption. So the
Yeah,
fact that there's a mental health court that helps decide this, I think protects people from the possibility of that.
totally.
So then Randall learns from Washington, one of the orderlies, that he could actually be kept in the hospital past his sentence because the hospital decides when he gets to leave. So he comes to group pretty hot about the fact that no one told him that he could be kept in the hospital indefinitely. And Nurse Ratched tells him that many of the inmates choose to remain in the hospital, and that's where he learns that like some people are have chosen to be there and aren't mandated to be there, and he is pretty confused about why the hell that would be. So we're back to the group, and the group descends into utter chaos. And Cheswick and Chief and McMurphy are sent to another part of the hospital. And this is our first time to see this part of the hospital. And the patients are like laying on the floor, and everybody looks catatonic. And so the three of them are sitting on a bench, and you're not quite sure what's going to happen. And they take Cheswick back first, and he is like protesting greatly while they're trying to carry him into this room.
Mm-hmm.
And then when he comes back out, he's basically non-responsive on a gurney. So then Randall goes into the room, and Let me back up. Randall and Chief are sitting on the bench, and Randall offers Chief a piece of juicy fruit, and Chief says, "Thank you." And that's the first part of the movie where you're like, "Oh, he can talk, and also he can hear."
And he
And
also
so
trusts Randall.
yes.
There's a newfound like rapport there of, okay, I'm gonna let you know that I can talk and hear. And Randall's
Yeah.
like, oh my God, you had us all fooled. You you tricked us all.
Yes. And so but also I think that's because Randall keeps talking to him and doesn't treat him like he's dumb.
Yeah.
And he even though he, like, frequently will call the other patients their nut jobs or crazies or, like, all of these, words we don't really use for mentally ill people anymore, um, he treats them all with a lot of respect. And so in this scene where he gives Chief the juicy fruit, Chief says, "Thank you." Then they actually talk about hatching a plan to escape. Because Randall's basically like, "I'm going to blow this pop stand. I don't want to be here." Then it shows Randall going into the room, and what they do in that room is electroshock therapy. So they put him on this gurney, they strap him down, they put some like a little ointment stuff on his temples, and he says, "A little dab will do ya." And that line is actually from a Brill Cream ad, and it wasn't written in the script. That was Jack Nicholson improv. And then it shows them putting the electric like tongs basically and applying the electricity to his head, and then it is like a very close up uncomfortable shot of him having a seizure, which
Yeah.
was really good acting. But I wanted to also talk about electroshock therapy since it was in this movie.
Yes. I think it was for like the time that this movie is based. I think that's kind of how it was. Like electroshock therapy still happens today, but it's very different
Yes.
than it
So
was depicted in the movie.
I looked up the history of electroshock therapy. And it was so originally, it was, according to the American Journal of Psychiatry, it was Italian physicians who took an idea that was already being tested, like in the 30s and 40s, and sought to derive a method of electrical seizure induction that had a quicker onset and fewer negative side effects. So they
Mhm.
started testing it in dogs, and I read that they would put one electrode in the mouth and one electrode in the anus of the dog, and that is how they were applying it. But the dogs were dying of cardiac arrest. And so then they realized that they just needed to concentrate on applying the electricity to the cranium.
Mhm.
Thank God, because that does not sound fun.
No.
So in 1938, they conducted their first human trial on a 39-year-old man with schizophrenia who had been found wandering a train station. And they administered about 12 treatments over the course of this man's hospitalization. And he returned to his wife and job in the community and wasn't psychotic anymore. So then they started using it on other things, other psychiatric conditions like depression. They even tried it for psoriasis and gastric ulcers, and they were just trying it on all sorts of things.
Mhm.
And it is still in use today, although it is a shortened duration time, but it still has cognitive blunting and short term memory problems that people have with ECT.
Yeah, and
Um,
the ECT is electroconclusive therapy, which is electroshock therapy. I had to that was confusing to me when I was looking it up. I was like, what is this acronym and is that what was happening? Um I also saw something too that when it's used now, they can also be put under anesthesia while it
yes,
happens. And that did not happen in the movie. He was very much conscious when it happened.
yes, because also they were using it as punishment, which
Yes.
that would not be
Yes.
the case today.
No.
People would consent. It wouldn't be used as I mean, it was basically a torture that they were
Yeah.
doing to him. Today, there's also transcranial magnetic stimulation or TMS, which also doesn't have a lot of negative side effects and can have a lot of benefits. And also, ketamine assisted psychotherapy has some of the same benefits without memory loss and with a very short recovery time. So it was pioneering research that we have now progressed into other things that aren't maybe as damaging.
Yeah.
But in the movie, like I said, it's used without consent and for torturous punishment. And some other torture punishments in the movie that were featured were like use of loud music and also just her passive aggressive public shaming of Nurse Ratched.
Mm-hmm.
So we back to the movie, we get to the night of the planned escape, and McMurphy's friends Candy and Rose arrive bearing liquor. And McMurphy bribes the night watchman, Turkle, who was played by Scatman Crothers, who was in 3 other movies with Jack Nicholson, including The Shining.
Oh, cool.
Yeah, so he bribes Turkle to let them onto the ward. Also, he has money. I don't know how he has money in his pocket, Jack Nicholson's
I
character.
have no clue because he came from prison
Prison.
to the, yeah, I have no clue.
Yeah.
Something else real quick before you continue on this part. Speaking of like Nurse Ratchet's like shame
Mm.
tactics, there was a moment in one of the group therapy sessions where she is being really shaming and she is pushing this one patient to talk, and he's saying like, I don't want to talk. I mean, I don't know if that's if he said it explicitly like that, but it's a tense scene because he's like, hell no, I don't want to go down that road. And one of the other guys asks Nurse Ratched, he says, why are we pushing this so hard? Like, can't we just move on to something else? And that is him having agency. Like, I very much think in any kind of therapeutic setting, you can ask that question. And the patient was right. It was like, yeah, why are we pushing this so hard? This person's clearly uncomfortable. They're on the verge of tears. They do not want to talk about this. Let's just move on. And it
Yeah.
really pisses her off. She has this very like she's not like overly emotive, but you can tell the rage. It's like this silent rage that she has.
She
Yeah.
is so good at looking cold.
Yes.
And I one of the fun trivia things I read was near the end of the filming of the movie, like everybody perceived her as cold. And so she stripped down to just her underwear in front of the cast and crew towards the end of filming just to prove that she was like a fun, not cold person.
She definitely deserved Best Actress because the
Oh,
acting is so good. So good.
amazing.
Yeah.
Amazing. So they're at the night of the planned escape. Turkle opens the lock on the window, and Candy and Rose sneak in, and there is like this drunken revelry that ensues. And Billy Bibbit, the character who has the stutter, has never had sex with a woman. And so he and Candy go into a private room, and it's very much implied that they are going to be having the sex.
Mm-hmm.
And instead of escaping, Randle and everyone falls asleep.
I can't
So,
help but laugh because he's so gung ho about like getting out of there. And then it's like, damn, I got drunk and slept in.
but also it shows a moment like once Billy and Candy go into the room, it shows him sitting there. And like, I assume he's thinking, I could go out this window right now, or I
Yeah.
could wait. Like, he's very much, he just, you could tell he really cares about the other patients that
He
are there.
genuinely does. It's very genuine. Like
Yes.
I think he even offers Billy to go with it because Billy's saying like, "Oh, essentially, I'm going to miss you." He's like, "Well, just come with us."
Yes.
And
Yeah.
I think he really meant that.
I think so too. So no one escapes. The day shift arrives, including Nurse Ratched. The whole place is just has gone to shit, ransacked everywhere. They're all probably hungover as all get out,
And
passed out on the floor.
the guard that he bribed is like so fucking pissed. He's like, "I'm going to lose my job and you guys are ruining this for me." But it's also kind of hilarious because it's like, "Well, but you did let them come in with alcohol." So like, why
Yeah,
would they be concerned about your job?
right. Yes, it's
Yeah.
not that's not their job to be concerned.
No. No.
So day shift arrives, it's all ransacked. They find Bibbit in bed with Candy, and Nurse Ratched shames him and says, I'm going to tell your mother what you did. And he says, please don't tell my mother. And then they take him to this other room,
And
And
she shames him in front of everybody, in front of
yes.
every patient. She does this and she asks him, "Aren't you ashamed?" And he says, "No."
Yeah.
And it really pisses her off. And then that's when she says, like, "I'm gonna have to tell your mom," and just an awful moment.
Yeah. Then Billy goes into this other room, and then you hear a scream, and everyone runs in, and you see that Billy has taken a broken glass and slit his own throat and is laying
Mhm.
there in a pool of very fake looking blood. It's the only thing in the movie I did not like.
Yeah.
Um, and then Randle McMurphy is so enraged that he attacks Nurse Ratched and is like choking her on the floor, like very much trying to kill her
Yeah.
until the orderlies get him off of her. And then he's gone for a while from the ward, and there's a rumor that he escaped. But one night later, Chief watches two orderlies return McMurphy to the ward and place him in his bed. And then Chief goes over and tells McMurphy that now is the time to escape. But then McMurphy does not respond, and then Chief realizes that he has been lobotomized.
Mhm.
So we'll take a detour into lobotomy land. Lobotomies were invented in the 30s by some neurosurgeons. There was not good evidence or research that lobotomies were effective, and also they were often performed without consent from people and without a lot of sterilization. In 1954, the era of widespread psychosurgery went away because of Thorazine and then the development of other psychiatric drugs. So it was about 20 years when they were doing lobotomies.
And
Mm,
it's also just inhumane.
yeah,
It's an inhumane procedure. It gives me, like, goosebumps to even think about, like, we really did that to people.
yes. One of the neurosurgeons, it said, performed hundreds and hundreds of
Oh my
lobotomies.
gosh. Which I don't understand because you would have to know after one that
It didn't work.
it didn't work. It doesn't work, but you keep doing it. It's wild.
But it might work in making someone who was not compliant compliant.
Yeah, if that's the goal. And that was the goal with Randall in this movie. It was like, he's out of control. We're going to make him compliant, AKA, he's just going to be a zombie. He's going to be not even like human anymore.
Right. One of the things I read in July 1952, Dr. Freeman performed 228 transorbital lobotomies, that's through your eye socket, in a 2-week period in West Virginia for a state sponsored lobotomy project. The newspapers called it Operation Ice Pick.
Oh, oh my God.
I know. Okay, so back to Chief and McMurphy. So Chief has this realization that McMurphy has been lobotomized. And Chief says that he is not going to leave him there in that condition. And then, out of mercy, he smothers him with a pillow. And then Chief pulls the marble water fountain thing that Randall had tried to lift earlier in the movie because Chief is enormous.
He's
And so
such a
he
big
bends
guy that
over.
he would be the one to do it. Yeah.
Yeah. And it's a struggle, but he's able to pick it up. And then he just like goes to the window, throws it out the window, jumps out the window, and the end of the movie is him running into these serene mountains.
End of film.
End of film.
Yeah, his rage towards Nurse Ratched was understandable.
100%.
Because Billy, she already knew Billy had been suicidal before in the past, and she knew that this threat of his mother, she knew it would make him suicidal again. She knew it and didn't care. I mean, maybe she wanted him to be. That's how twisted she is in my mind.
She's and I've seen this movie a few times before, but when I rewatched it this week, it's like it feels more insidious every time I watch it. I
Yeah.
notice more and more nuanced things, and
Mhm.
it's very disturbing. I did watch it in 2 parts just because it is such a disturbing subject. It's disturbing how it ends. It's disturbing that we still mistreat people in mental health facilities. That was
Yeah.
one thing I also was thinking about and wanted to talk about is how there is a shortage of beds now, but also some of the county and state facilities don't look that much different from the Oregon State Mental Hospital in this movie from 1975. Like today, some of them still pretty much look
Well,
like that.
yeah, because the funding is so low. They're not going to do upgrades. And it looks so sterile, clinical. It's not warm at all. And it's kind of like that, it's like if you're mentally ill or if you're like unhoused as an example, you just deserve the bare minimum is the belief. It's like, well, you should just be thankful you have a bed. And I'm like, well, the bed is like thin as a piece of paper and it's really cold in here and we're probably not getting great food. Like it's just very I don't know. I think society kind of views it that way. Like, you're lucky to have this. I don't agree, right? If whether you have money or not, or you're really sick, why not have a little bit of comfort in your life,
Right.
anyways? And so that, yeah, some places do still look so much like this.
Yes, and another part, that we would be remiss to not talk about is the troubled teen industry, which, if you're not
Mhm.
familiar with that, is, basically, it's like mental health help for teenagers, but it's very fucked up, and that a lot of them are private, so you have to have a lot of money to send your kid there,
Mhm.
and also they employ a lot of abusive tactics. Some of them are used for conversion therapy to try to get gay kids not to be gay, which is illegal in some states, but not in every state, not in Texas.
Of course not. And it doesn't work
And it doesn't
because
work.
it would never work. Yeah.
Correct. Also, gay conversion therapy was invented by Lovus, who is the same person who invented ABA therapy for autistic people.
Oh, that tracks.
Yeah. So, also, they use isolation to punish the teens in these hospitals. There's physical punishment. Of course, sex abuse is completely rampant. And how they get a lot of kids to these facilities is using a quote escort service, where basically they have large men go into the teens' room at night and get them out of bed and like kidnap them from their homes in the cover of darkness to take them to these facilities. So I know there's a ton of documentaries on Hulu about this right now if you haven't heard about it, but
Mm,
we really I mean, it's been 49 years since this movie came out, and we really haven't done a lot better
no.
for people with severe mental health issues than 49 years ago. It's definitely an area that we need more money, more help.
Well, and these places are also traumatizing. So you put someone with a mental illness in a place like this, and their trauma just grows and grows and grows. It's like how would you get better just constantly being exposed to trauma?
Right.
I don't
You
think
can't.
you would. No. Yeah. So this was a really good one for us to cover. And Nurse Ratched is terrible. And that's my big conclusion.
Well, and if you I mean, there are so many today, even 49 years later, popular culture references to Nurse Ratched in so many movies and TV
Oh
shows, and
yeah.
anytime there's a mean nurse, it's Nurse Ratched.
Yeah. Yeah, the show with Sarah Paulson is I think that show is just called Ratchet, is really good.
Oh, I haven't seen that.
It's really good. Yeah, she does a good job of playing the, cold I don't have to say very much for you to know that I'm dangerous, like, kind of person.
Yeah, because
Mhm.
Nurse Ratched in this movie doesn't say a lot.
No, she
She
didn't say a
doesn't have
lot
a ton of
and
lines.
no, and that's why the acting is so good, like, to be able to act without a whole bunch of lines, that's pretty
It's
amazing.
amazing.
Mhm.
I also saw another fun fact is that Lily Tomlin was originally gonna have that role,
Oh,
and they flipped, and so Lily Tomlin did the role that Louise Fletcher was gonna do because of timing,
yeah.
and so that's why she ended up in that role.
Well, it worked out.
Worked out good because I don't see Lily Tomlin in that role, but
I don't either. No.
all right. So, if you enjoyed this episode of Real Therapy Gone Wrong, please like, review, and subscribe. We would love to hear your feedback about One Flew Over the Cuckoo's Nest. And also follow us wherever you listen to your podcasts. In our next episode, we will discuss the show Scrubs, season 5, episode 13, which is titled My 5 Stages, which you can stream on Hulu. If you'd like Real Therapy Gone Right, we are 2 actual therapists who help clients on a daily basis. Contact us if you'd like to learn more about our work or want to hire us. You can find Lindsay at relationshipmatterstx.com or Brandy at sellerscounseling.com. If you're making a movie or TV show and do not want to find your show on our podcast, we are available to consult on your projects. Get in touch.